Hey guys, I want to talk about why I think comic book lettering is so cool and highlight some of the reasons. So let me share my screen and talk about it. What makes comic book lettering so cool? Well, traditionally, comic book lettering is a handmade process. And there's a great artist I follow, Todd Klein, who's one of the best in the business, who has a great classic website that talks about the process, who's written a few different books on the subject and has a great resource of knowledge of the history of comic book lettering. So check him out sometime. But one of the things that is really cool to me is that it started out as a handmade process. And so it wasn't something that was done by typing or some other computerized process, even though it has become computerized today. It started out with hand tools and was crafted, again, by hand. One of the other resources that I think is great for current contemporary comic book fonts I want to mention is Blambot. Blambot has one of the coolest libraries of contemporary fonts that they've created that they sell, and it's really awesome. So check out their website, Blambot. All right, so one of the reasons that I think comic book lettering is so cool is that it literally tells a story, but not just in what's written, but in how it looks. That's what makes it special. And that's why it's a perfect marriage of storytelling and, technical um, storytelling, right? So you have so many different varieties of fonts that are available, right? You've got what I think is cool in this picture is all the different fonts that were created for each one of the characters. Everyone has their iconic masthead, which is their name written in their style that creates that cool recognition, that logo basically for that character, all done in their font style. So the story progresses as as you read the story, but also as you see the images and put together, that's the complete picture. And again, what's cool about comic book art is the ability to just pause, to read things in a particular order, study the image, see the detail. To me, again, it's perfect storytelling. Sound effects have a real impact. So you're caught in a medium that does not have audible sound. So you have to convey the sound of what's happening in a unique and artistic way. I love that challenge. So, of course, over the years have developed all these fancy words, which is onomatopoeia, is the technical term. Not going to spell it for you. Just like I can't spell any of these words either. But it's essentially figuring out the sound your mouth makes or the sound that you hear, but spelled in its unique way. And then stylizing it so it actually appears like what's happening. So an explosion looks like it's exploding. Uh, Letters that are repeated look like a tap, 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 and so on. So figuring that out is an art all into itself. But to have an impact, you got to use the right type of lettering for the right story. And here, of course, Bane is beating up Batman and breaking his back. So, what does breaking Batman's back actually sound like? And you can sit there and see the drama of the image. Bane busts him down, leaves him for dead. Cool. Also, one of the awesome things about lettering is it's imperfect. So, especially in today's world, things really are being perfected. So the computerized imagery, anything done on the computer, just by its very nature, is meant to be precise. But lettering is something imperfect because it's handmade. So it's cool to see that. And there's this interesting contradiction, I think, between how the process of lettering, the artist is trying to make the letters look the same every time they write the letters. But of course, that's virtually impossible. So there is a little bit of variability that you can detect when you look at those comic book letters, which is really cool, I think. If you look at old artwork, you can see the faded image of, the light blue process where they put in the original lettering as they were writing it, and then someone comes back over the top and actually finishes it off. I love seeing that detail in the process and understanding all those different steps that were used by those artists to craft um, those letters, which to them was such an ordinary thing. They didn't care. It was just like okay, this is my mundane job. But for us to look at it, it's cool. It's like a craft, right? Another really fun thing is to think that fonts become character voices. Again, just like a sound effect, you can't hear the noise. You also can't really hear the person's voice. So what you're reading is going to give you a cue as to what they sound like. And so characters take on really different voices based on the type of font. So again, from Blambot, they have all these different dialogue fonts that they've developed over the years to show someone yelling or whispering or an electronic voice or a natural voice or an angry voice or a deep voice. So it's really cool and interesting to think that you can add that personality to your work just by changing the font. And you'd get annoyed with that if that was done in a normal novel. But in a comic, you're expecting it. You want to see it because you want to grasp onto every little scrap of storytelling you can see in the visual of the image. Looking back at Calvin and Hobbes, one of my all-time favorite comic strips, you'll see how Bill Watterson approached that process. And I always loved, you could see just the handmade nature of his letters, but they really, I think, fit the childlike quality of Calvin, and it totally expressed who he was and his personality. Like I said a little bit earlier, lettering blends art and craft. So it requires skill to do hand lettering. It also requires skill to do electronic lettering, but it's also an art form. And so sometimes it's maybe thought of as a childish thing or, who knows, some sort of unnecessary thing. But the fact that you can take a story and develop in multiple ways, both with the image and the text, and create that combination, you've generated a new thing. You've invented something else. And that's why I love it so much. So there you have it. Those are some of the reasons why I think comic book lettering is cool. If you find some awesome examples, share them with me because I like hearing about it. All right. I don't like hearing about it. I like reading about it. All right. See you next time.